T-minus 5,
Are we alone in the universe is one of humanity's oldest questions,
4,
with tremendous scientific and philosophical implications.
3,
When we look to the night sky and see the abundance of stars, we can only wonder if life could exist elsewhere.
2,
In search of our answers, our attention is often drawn to our closest neighbor,
1,
the red planet, Mars.
0, ignition, liftoff, 30 minutes after the hour.
Astronomers in the late 1800s reported observing a series of channels or canals on the surface of Mars, hinting at the possible existence of either natural or even engineered watercourses. This idea infiltrated popular culture at the time, with Martian-built canals famously featuring in H.G. Wells's novel The War of the Worlds. In the early to mid-1900s, advances in telescopes led to clearer observations of the Martian surface, and this shifted the scientific consensus towards the cold, arid, and dried-out Mars we now know to exist. The canals, as it turned out, may have instead been wind-blown sand dunes. All known life needs water to exist, and therefore the observation of a desiccated, barren Mars was a seemingly insurmountable barrier to the possibility of life. However, this was not the end of the road for water on Mars. In 1971, Mariner 9 became the first spacecraft to orbit another planet and return photos of Mars showing a dynamic world, with evidence of vast, now dried river valleys. In the decades since, 10 missions have successfully landed spacecraft on Mars, and there are currently 14 satellites orbiting the planet. These missions to Mars have only strengthened the evidence for a former presence of Martian waters. Missions have observed structures such as river basins, as well as water-bearing rocks and minerals such as clays. We have similar features on Earth, but only in the presence of water. Therefore, all of this evidence supports that billions of years ago there was water on Mars. So what happened to this water? Owing to Mars's smaller size, its internal heat dissipated more quickly. This rapid cooling caused the liquid outer core, the engine of its magnetic field, to slow and eventually solidify. With the core's motion ceasing, the planet lost the dynamo effect that generated its global magnetic field. This meant the planet lost the magnetic field protecting its atmosphere from harsh solar winds, resulting in its atmosphere being mostly ripped away. This loss of atmosphere drove the drying of the Martian waters, resulting in the barren landscapes we observe today. However, thanks to the data from the Martian missions, scientists have an idea of environments that would have once existed on early Mars. Scientists believe that as the water started to evaporate, it became salty, at least twice as salty as Earth's seawater, and even saltier than this in some places. It also became rich in sulfur, especially in the form of sulfide. On Earth, we know sulfide as the chemical that gives us the smell of rotten eggs or blocked drains. But sulfur is one of the key elements required for life as we know it on Earth. As it happens, the other elements needed for life has also been identified in Martian rocks and soils: carbon, hydrogen, nitrogen, oxygen, and phosphorus. If life ever existed on Mars, it would have existed in or near bodies of water, which is why the Mars rovers are often sent to these specific locations. The NASA rovers, Curiosity and Perseverance, are in Gale and Jezero crater respectively, the site of two proposed former Martian lakes. Any potential Martian organisms might have left behind evidence of their existence. Before we send missions to Mars to search for evidence of life, we need to have an idea of what kind of evidence we should look for. This preparation is important because sending missions to Mars is incredibly complicated and expensive. Scientists can start this preparation by studying environments on Earth that are similar in chemistry to early Mars. No environment on Earth is a perfect fit, as Earth is rich in both life and oxygen. But there are many that are similar enough for us to develop our understanding of Martian water and whether life could have ever existed in it. One such environment, and an environment that we have studied at the Open University, is the Color Peak Spring System on Axel Heiberg Island in the high Arctic of Canada. The water in these springs is very salty and sulfur-rich, matching the proposed Martian waters. The average air temperature at Color Peak is -20 degrees centigrade. In winter, it can go as low as -40 degrees centigrade, but the springs on these islands never freeze because of their high salt content, in the same way that salt is spread on roads to stop ice forming. For our study, we collected sediment and water from Color Peak into sterile plastic tubes that were stored at low temperature, around 4 degrees centigrade, the typical temperature of a fridge, until they reached a laboratory in the UK. Once in the laboratory, we can start to answer our key questions. How close is the chemistry to Mars? What type of life lives there? And what does this tell us about possible ancient life on Mars? To define the chemistry, we used a technique called inductively coupled plasma optical emission spectroscopy. This technique works by heating water to create plasma, which is a very hot and energized gas. This plasma then emits specific colors of light by each element in the water, which we can then detect and measure. Using data from the surface of Mars collected by the NASA Curiosity rover, we then used a computer program to model the chemical composition of the ancient water of Mars. The composition of the predicted Martian water was incredibly similar to the water from the Color Peak Springs. This means the bacteria living in the Color Peak Springs are surviving and growing under conditions like those that might have once existed on Mars. We identify the bacteria that live in the Color Peak Springs by looking at their deoxyribonucleic acid, their DNA. The well-known double helix of DNA is the code that instructs cells to produce and regulate different proteins. There is one key gene that lets us identify the bacteria that live in an environment, the 16S rRNA gene. This gene, which is found in all bacteria, performs a key role in helping the cell replicate and grow. By studying this gene in an environment, we can identify the different bacteria that live there under these Mars-like conditions. Using this approach, our research revealed that most bacteria living in Color Peak belong to a group called sulfur-oxidizing bacteria, or SOB. SOB use sulfur as a source of energy. Given the large amount of sulfur in Color Peak, it makes sense that this is a successful way to live in this environment. The water of ancient Mars would have also contained lots of sulfur, meaning that the main energy source of SOB would also have been available. Some SOB can also grow without oxygen, something that is very low on Mars, and can instead use nitrogen-based chemicals that have been detected in the rocks of Mars. After showing that SOB can thrive in the Color Peak spring water, and knowing that all the key elements required for growth are present on Mars, we tested whether the modeled Martian water would support growth. By knowing the concentration of the specific elements, it is possible to calculate whether there is enough of these elements to produce the energy that the bacteria need to grow. The equation used to calculate the energy is known as the Gibbs energy equation, and was developed by the scientist Willard Gibbs in the 1870s. This equation calculates the energy from the concentration of the key elements in the Martian water. From this, we can say that not only would SOB produce enough energy to grow, but we can also say that they would be one of the only types of bacteria that would be able to grow in these specific waters. This is an exciting result because SOB actually alter the chemistry of their environment, so we can look for multiple signs that they once existed, including the formation of specific minerals.
These can be used as evidence of life long after the bacteria are dead. With the insights gained from the research conducted here on Earth, if bacteria like SOB want to grow on Mars, we now have the blueprints on how to locate them. With this knowledge and the current focus on Martian exploration, perhaps one day soon we'll be able to answer the question, are we alone in the universe?